Welcome back to Beating Sisyphus, a production of the Canisades Center for Emerging Markets in collaboration with the Cornell Emerging Markets Institute Club. Today, we're honored to welcome on Alicia Garcia-Herrero. Alicia is the chief economist for Asia Pacific and Natixis and a senior fellow at the European think tank Bruegel. Thank you very much for joining us today, Alicia. I'd like to start by asking you a quick question. How did you get interested in emerging markets?
Well, it's a good question. So, I'm old enough to tell you that when I started getting interested, most people didn't. And it was all about the European Monetary Union and all of that. And I thought that's boring. These markets move up and down quickly, and you have a lot of politics and a lot of, it was just much more fun. And that was the reason, nothing but that. And it's a good reason because, I can tell you my first area was Latin America. I worked for the IMF, and then I, eventually did more on China and Asia. And only because I have that Latin background, I could understand many things. It's not that it is similar, but it's still more, it changes rapidly. And the West doesn't. So if you are educated on a Western economy, it's very hard to know what's going on. So I'm very grateful that I made that decision.
Wonderful. Yeah, I completely agree. I think emerging markets are fascinating and for sure definitely can be a lot more volatile than the developed ones. You've done a great deal of research on China. How has China managed to become such an important economic power? And why is there so much concern over its rise?
Exactly because we can't really believe that China made such strides. Yeah. And that makes people nervous also because China has an amazing history as civilization, and we Europeans, in a way, or even Westerners more generally, kind of do not really know because we had our own civilization on the upside. You can think of, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire. So we kind of do not know that they were an empire then. And I think by now people know, but it's taken us a while to realize that China was actually very central in a big part of the world, which we didn't know. Literally, we didn't know. We didn't know it existed. So, I think from that note, we should, of course, understand that a country that was so important then will not just be satisfied, with mediocre importance. And I think that has pushed China, and the century of humiliation is a way to kind of, from threat to you go from the lowest to, and I think that pushes China. Even today, when you talk to Chinese officials, they still have this in mind. Sometimes, frankly, they may use it, but in essence, there is this idea that we're back. So a lot of China's success is related to their own intent. They want to be back. Not every emerging economy wants to be back because they were never there. They were never at that level. It's very difficult if you've. So China was never a colony, and on the contrary, it colonized differently. They don't like this word, but there were many sovereign states. You can say subversion of colonization. So that is why I think China is where it is beyond its massive effort, especially its citizens, I have to say, making humongous efforts to, keep all of these, in a way, repress savings for the government to invest where it wishes, and no questions asked. That wouldn't happen in a democracy, but not only a democracy, in any country where, the citizens do not believe in that dream. You see, so the dream is very important. The China dream, this is Xi Jinping's own words. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I fully agree with what you are saying. But if we were to pinpoint why China's industrial policy has worked, while industrial policy in other countries have not worked, why a state-led type of capitalism has worked in China and has not worked in other places, what do you think is that magic combination that has done this tremendous success in such a short period of time?
So we are going to publish a paper today, which we presented actually this afternoon, on comparing India and China and the development model. And I'm not saying India's development model will not be successful, but I do want to highlight that China's development model is not easily replicable. And China had very specific characteristics, one being indeed this huge excess savings that could be deployed. So it's not so much being effective or even efficient, it's basically getting it at whatever cost. That's the model. The model is the cost is irrelevant, but we get there. And very few countries can do that. So in a way, why? Because people are accepting of the consequences. Wages that are lower than they should be, lower than productivity for many years, and savings that are not remunerated with negative interest rates. That's China's secret in essence, is the acceptance, whether implicit, I would say implicit, of their citizens, that let's call it social contract, which goes beyond the one child policy, well beyond that acceptance for the sake of the future, and that is China's rise. So for me, that's the model. And then, of course, you need to also attract enough foreign direct investment. This is India's problem, by the way, that transfers technology when you don't have it, that creates the dynamism, the managerial, the whatever, that very importantly for India, and which never happened in China, though, which breaks the oligopolies. In China, they didn't break them. And they still, but again, China has a lot of inefficiencies. Don't think it's all silver and gold. No. They managed because they put so much on the table that even if they were inefficient, they still got it. But not every country can do that. Again, you need to be efficient. That makes it much harder. So China's model is not replicable. It's not because of the political regime. It's beyond that. The resources needed are not there. The sacrifices that the population needs to make are not there. So for that reason, I think China's model is not replicable again.
Yeah. Follow-up question. But which aspects? I'm now in the Industry Congress in Spain. So what parts of the China formula need to be replicated somehow? Because I have to tell them what should be replicable, what we need to learn from China to be able to compete with China.
A couple of things. So first, the education system, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I wouldn't focus even on tertiary education, to be frank. I would focus on vocational education. It's very, very impressive. And I think that's important if you want to become a manufacturing power. I know Spain has improved a lot on that because, there's a lot of, but many other emerging economies have a long way to go. So depending, Lourdes, on whom you want to advise, and I'm thinking about where you are now, I made that little comment. But anyway, the other thing I think China has is a massive central, but so top-down, but then quite decentralized innovation system. So, the local governments have a lot of power, but the overall guidelines are in the 5-year plan and beyond. So, yes, they have margin, but they know where they're heading. They are now, of course, such level of planning can be counterproductive because, in essence, you can get the wrong sectors. I would say China has been quite lucky and also capable of choosing the sectors, but they've not done well on every sector. People only know about the good sectors. So there's always, there's always a plus and minus of basically guiding fully your innovation policy. But overall, I think China has been quite successful. And again, and even if this is not said often now, foreign companies have a lot to say about this, and foreign universities as well. So, and I'm not saying it's only that, but it is also that. So it's a combination of indigenous innovation and, of course, a lot of transfer of knowledge, basically, and that China has sought, rightly so, and that the West has offered, and I guess rightly so, but it has to be acknowledged because it seems it's never happened, and that's not right. It has happened.
And so in our last minute with us, I'd like to turn to one of those specific industries that you mentioned that the Chinese government's focused a lot on, and that's real estate. A lot of people were talking about the collapse of the Chinese real estate market, but it doesn't seem they've yet had a Lehman Brothers moment or like a 2008 moment where you've seen a massive decline. Could you explain a little bit more on that situation?
It is as follows. It is a major collapse, actually in relative terms as big as Spain in 2010. 1/3 of fixed asset investment, 1/3 of growth. And this is Rogoff saying this, although I have estimated it myself, and it's totally true. Huge shock. Now you say, why not a Lehman Brothers? Why not? Well, because it's impossible. Because all of this real estate was financed by Chinese households, back to square one, through actually not even Chinese banks. Mostly Chinese households through so-called pre-sales. So they buy in advance, they give all of the cash, the developers spend it, and good luck if you get your apartment and at the when the cycle started turning. So who has lost? The households. And what is the big loss for China? That the households really are not turning the page. They are disenchanted. They don't want to consume. They certainly don't want to buy a new house, and that is dragging the economy. So the shock is slow but steady, Thomas. It's not over, and it's a really important shock. It's just that it's not, because for the US, for Spain, why did it crash? Because we had funding needs, because we were funding our real estate crisis through foreign savings. China is their own savings. So no crash. It's like Japan in the early 90s. That's the comparison. Did Japan crash? No. But what happened to Japan? Deflation. 2 lost decades. China is not yet on the lost decade for a number of reasons, but it is in deflation. So, it is costly for China, very much. It's just differently from the US.
We are always asking one question to the experts we are interviewing is, choose one emerging market that you like, that you see hope for the next 10 years. It could be China, if China is still an emerging market. So which emerging market would you choose and why?
I very much like India, although, I know it's sometimes people say a lost case, but, I still believe in that vibrancy. I think there's a lot of things that need to change. But for the world, I tell you why. I wouldn't say that I like or I dislike. No, I think India can turn the page. Let me explain. We are in a bipolar world. I'm sorry for the Europeans, but we are. The only country that can change that is India. India is the hope for what the Chinese think they want, which is, of course, in my view, not the case. They want bipolar world, but they say they want multipolar. The world will only be multipolar thanks to India, because India will open the door if it manages. So, I have that hope, if you see, because I don't like a bipolar world. I was born in a bipolar world. I hated the idea of, this, like Cold War. So I don't want to end up in a Cold War. So for me, India is the hope, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Excellent closing. Let me just add, because I'm in Europe right now in this industry congress in Spain. If Europe gets its act together, I agree that, okay, the chances are very, very slim. Europe is still and could remain a powerhouse.
No, of course. Yeah, Lourdes, if Europe gets its act together, the fact that India wants a multipolar world will help Europe, and Europe will help India, because both can be like for the time being like a square, if you see what I mean. Not a land with two powers fighting. A square is much nicer than a line. And then you can get hexagon, la. You can get more in. But I agree, if India opens that, Europe can be part of that square. But Europe alone, very difficult, for reasons you know very well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think your optimism in closing in this, at times dark, in these times that are a little bit dark, is very important. I am teaching, you are also teaching, we need to give hope for the next generation. So thank you very much, Alicia, to make your super busy time for us. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much,
you.
Alicia. It was an honor.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.